Hello, welcome to the new and improved Year of the Woman. We have more women running for office this year than we have ever had before, breaking the previous record in 1992. Well, no, there were lots of records broken, but breaking even 1992's great big record. I think one of the things that's often been said about women running for office is that men get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and see the next president of the United States, whereas women have to be asked to run for office.
Sometimes they don't even look in the mirror.
Yeah, they just say, I'm going to put one foot on the floor, and it's on the way to the White House. I think, so there's an assumption that women have to be asked to run for office. And then I think this year there's a new assumption, which is that all the women running for office are just running for office because they're so angry at Donald Trump. And that everybody out there, it's 207 Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes who are running for office. They were all bartenders last week, and now they're going to be congresswomen. So we know that's not true, and there's a great diversity of experience. But Rashida, I want to start with you. Tell us, you were in office long before Donald Trump. So tell us what made you run for office the first time?
And it took 7 different people to convince me to run in 2008. Wow. And I made history there, becoming the first Muslim woman ever elected in the Michigan legislature, not even knowing that I would make history. I didn't even know that would have been the case. But I think for me, it was, I think for women, we tend to, wait till we're needed. Does that make any sense? And I always tell people, yeah, Trump's in office, but this opportunity when Congressman Conyers retired came, and it was like, do I stay outside of the ring or do I jump in and fight from within? And it was this urgency and this sense of, I jokingly call it the bat signal. Like the bat signal's up, girls, and it's like, we women have to just feel this sense of urgency, need to be somewhere, because we do like to fix things and we do a really good job at it.
Yeah. So who was the key conversation? You had 7, so maybe you don't need to all 7.
I'll tell you.
Who got you?
It was Shelley Weisberg, who at that time she worked at the ACLU of Michigan, and she said, Rashida, people like us don't think about running for office, and that's what's wrong with Lansing. And it's just a light bulb went in. She was the 7th person, and at that moment it was 10 days before the filing deadline, and I put my name in. I did throw up literally right after, like physically. No, it was really up. My brother was with me, and he was like, "Are you okay?" And again, it's the fact that it is this major step for us, and that we take this so seriously, much more than I think men do.
Right. And Pearl, tell us your story.
Sure. Well, I mean, years ago, I have a lot of colleagues at the Asian Pacific American Bar Association. A lot of my colleagues have kind of encouraging me to run. So I think that's where the first seed was planted. But beyond that, nothing more. And I think with me, it ties in a lot more with my own personal journey.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, I was actually a victim of a campus sexual assault. I ended up going through the criminal justice system as a victim, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life. I was very displeased with my prosecutor. I didn't get the justice that I was seeking, and I saw a lot of problems with the criminal justice system. So that, in essence, completely changed the course of my life, and I decided to become a special victims prosecutor. So I spent a decade at Delaware County District Attorney's Office as a special victims domestic violence prosecutor, and I went on to become the chief of the human trafficking unit. And while I was there, I was adamant in working on criminal justice reform. So what I was known for in law enforcement was I was able to secure the first human trafficking conviction in the state of Pennsylvania. I then went on to work with state legislators, both Republicans and Democrats, to expand protections for victims. And then I was able to secure the first human trafficking conviction under the new legislation. But while I was at the DA's office, I ended up getting sick, battling cancer. And that made me realize how life short was. And so as much as I loved working with victims one-on-one, and I could have stayed a special victims prosecutor for the remainder of my career, I wanted to effectuate greater change. And so I went to work for our current Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, who's a Democrat. I had the good fortune of leading our campus safety initiative across the Commonwealth, working on campus sexual assaults, opioids, mental health, alcohol abuse. And while I was trekking across the Commonwealth, I recognized, hey, I want to do more, and it's federal. I did not expect this seat to open up, and when it did, I jumped for it.
Right, right. What's the thing that has surprised you most about running for office? Do you feel like it is still different for women, or I mean, have people reacted to you in particular as a woman? Do you think?
I think the biggest distinction for me is running as a woman of color. So in Pennsylvania, there has never been a woman of color elected into Congress in the history of Pennsylvania.
And Pennsylvania now has no women in its congressional delegation.
Correct.
Largest state,
yes.
One of the largest state delegations.
So, I certainly think that has been an interesting factor, and just a funny story, as I'm campaigning, for example, I had this older man say, "Oh, you're the Asian girl that's running." I'm like, "Sir, Asian girl won't be on the ballot. Please remember Pearl Kim." So, I have moments like that on the campaign trail.
Did you get Muslim girl?
Yes. All the time, yeah. No, and the heighten of obviously the Islamophobia in our country is so heightened. I was like the Muslim girl when I got to people's doors. A lot of my opponents obviously reminding them of that my faith is Islam, and so of course I got that a lot. But I also got really cool pronunciation about Rashida, but I think really that direct human contact, and Pearl probably agrees, it changes people's perception. I mean, really right away. And I think that is how a lot of women of color have been able to connect with people, majority that do not reflect our faith, do not reflect our backgrounds, been able to support us and for us to be able to win.
I've heard that so much, that in particular women of color are leading this very different way of campaigning.
Yeah.
Do you think there is, having run for office before, do you think there is something different about the ways women are able to run for office, and are they a little more liberated this year?
I always know that door to door in that, centering everything around that direct human contact. I mean, it's irreplaceable. Billboards, robocalls, mailers, nothing can replace that direct conversation face to face that you have with people. And I think women of color, we tend to kind of embrace that more, maybe. I even see women, white women, do it all the time. I mean, I think women in general, no matter their background, do it very well. I actually jokingly say to people, we actually get people to answer the door more often than males. Men don't get, it's true. I see the percentage of how many doors people open for me versus, a field organizer who's a male on my campaign. But that direct human contact, what I love about it is you don't become the Asian girl. You don't become, that happened to you, or you're the eldest of 14. Those are the kinds of direct connections that I think happen as completely transforms people's view of you.
So that's an advantage to running for office for women, right? That someone's going to answer the door for them. What are still the disadvantages? Is it money? Is it the old boys network? What do you think is the biggest hurdle?
I mean, it's also credentials. There's this assumption, even when I go to the door, that I'm young and did you just graduate from high school? Or not realizing that I'm also an attorney, that I've worked on a number of things, a former state representative. All of these things that I think come up is we always still have to start with our credentials and our qualifications versus our male counterparts.
Yeah. So, of course, elephant in the room, we've got these hearings going on, the Kavanaugh hearings. Kavanaugh, for those of you who haven't dashed out to look, Kavanaugh's just making his statement. But I think this goes to, in 1991, I've been thinking a lot about Anita Hill and those hearings and how they inspired a lot of women to run. I think you guys were probably too young to remember, but anyway. But how do you think it matters having women in Washington? And can you relate that to what you're seeing in the Kavanaugh hearings? Do you think it does make a difference?
Absolutely. Do you see the view of what Professor Ford was looking at? I mean, I can't imagine. All I saw was this men, and I think, Pearl probably agrees. I mean, this is not a Republican-Democratic issue. This is an issue about women and protecting women and giving so many women a voice. Even for me, taking on a very prominent civil rights organization, a leader there that literally targeted me, sexually harassed me for months.
You have your own Me Too story, yes.
And taking on that person and how very much many of us are living through these hearings. And again, our lens are so uniquely different that I love the fact that women, no matter sometimes, if there's an R, a D, or I next to their name or whatever, that we do see things a little bit much more authentically, much more sincerely about, and very focused on what it would mean for someone like him to be on our Supreme Court. I just, really hope that the kind of moral compass and kind of courage that comes with women that run for office, that it stays there, that they're not bullied And that's what I see sometimes happening to women in Congress now, being bullied into making this more of about a political strategy versus than about doing the right thing.
Pearl, what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've just found this whole Me Too movement so fascinating. I remember I was speaking at a college, and this is prior to me starting to campaign by any means, and someone asked me, where do you think this Me Too movement is going, and where do you foresee it going? And at that point, I said, well, I think it's absolutely an incredible social movement, and I'm happy to see that men and women feel comfortable to come forward and to break their silence. I said, but at that point, I actually didn't see it going any further. I said, because I don't see any level of accountability. And then within weeks is when I started to see top executives start resigning, and then you see the Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, and then Bill Cosby getting sentenced, and I was like, look at that. I wasn't necessarily expecting that this movement was going to be such a powerful social movement, that it would actually hold individuals accountable. And then now I'm running in this current climate where I'm like, what's the next step? The next step is to elect leadership, is to promote leadership of men and women who care about this issue so you can actually effectuate institutional change. So it's really fascinating to me, with these hearings. How much do these senators, number one, are they able to accurately determine the credibility of any victim one way or the other? And if so, how much will it ultimately factor into their vote,
And how does it make a difference having, the Republican side is still all men. How does it make a difference having more women on the panel in terms of their being able to, does gender affect your ability to evaluate her credibility, or what do you?
Well, no, I think my specific situation is unique. It's not necessarily a gender thing. It's also that I have the background of being a former special victims prosecutor, right? But I do think the most important part is to have different perspectives at the table.
Right. And it's definitely become a very political issue. So is it possible to separate politics from your own personal story as you're watching this?
Yeah, in the sense that, yeah, I think so, because I think I can objectively say that, everything that I have seen and heard, and I want to make it clear, I have not watched the testimony in full, but I don't believe any of us in this room has had the opportunity to do so. I have no reason to question her credibility. I also recognize as a former special victims prosecutor that even in criminal court, when I had to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, the jury instruction said very clearly, if the testimony of a sexual assault victim is believed, that is sufficient to convict. Right? Now, I understand that there's different circumstances. You have to, take in corroborating evidence and so forth. But, what I also want to make very clear is someone's delay in a complaint should also not be a factor necessarily in determining someone's credibility, because the lack of a prompt complaint is very common.
I'm going to move to questions in just a minute, but let me ask one more question of you. Have you, one thing that I noticed, I was out campaigning with, before the New York primary with Alessandra Biaggi, who was running for state senate, and Zephyr Teachout, who was running for attorney general, and it was really interesting seeing their dynamic, and there was really a dynamic sort of, women running together, and there does seem to be this network that's developed. Have you noticed that at all in your own? You're running in Pennsylvania where there's suddenly a lot of women running. You're in Michigan. Have you?
Yeah, I don't. It's organically happening.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's being the eldest or kind of just always being this nurturing person, but yeah, I'm campaigning a lot for other women right now and just helping uplift them in any way I can. And again, it's just natural. It's not strategic. Many of us didn't even know each other before, but reaching out to each other. Even just the other day, reaching out to Johanna Hayes in Connecticut, like, I got your back, anything I can do.
So it's not just local, it's
absolutely. Yeah.
Have you found the same thing?
So I guess in my circumstance, it's a little bit different. I'm the only female Republican running, and so the rest of my counterparts that are women are on the Democratic ticket, but I will be meeting them all tonight at a forum.
That's right, I did see that. And it's funny because those 4 women who are running in Pennsylvania, the Democrats they did an event with Obama last week, and they're very much, they're sort of this, this squad of 4 women. So let's go to questions. I'm just looking out. It's a little hard to see. Does anybody have a question? Do we have a mic? Not a single question. Sorry, there's a microphone over here. Yeah, in the back.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hakeem with Aon. Just curious how your families are supporting you in your journeys and support and all that, if you could share.
So I love this question. I'm just going to add something. I love this question because again, this is this male-female thing, whereas men, women are always like, who's going to take care of the kids? And men are never asked that question. On the other hand, it is a legitimate question, like for both men and women, like how are your families responding? You have a daughter, like how, or I'm sorry, you have a son.
Two sons,
sons, okay.
Yeah. No, they're great. I mean, my 7-year-old literally thinks I'm going to Congress to give Trump a timeout. That's my 7-year-old. Yeah. You could tell he's growing up in an activist household. My son Adam is 13. When he was 9, it was when I think at that time there was something in USA Today depicting Muslims as Nazis, and it was this cartoon. It was awful, and I was talking to his dad about it, and he walked in the room and he said, "Mama, don't worry. If anybody asks if I'm Muslim, I'll lie and tell them I'm not." And I just cried. But when I won, there's a picture of him. I mean, we're like twins. He looks like he hates when people say that about us. But where he's so happy. And I said, see, bullies don't win. And so there is this amazing, I think, we inspire our kids in so many ways. And I thought about this last night, talking about making sure that, I have 2 boys and raising them in a way that, obviously, what we see now, and trying to create advocates among our counterparts in the male community, and trying to do that for them in so many ways. And you should hear Adam. He's like, I know, Mom. I know. Because I'm constantly talking to him about it. But it's incredible. It's an incredible journey. My mother is inspired. My grandmother, who still lives in the Middle East, is like having parties every day. I mean, it's really wonderful. But it has uplifted so many people to have someone like me with a name like mine, my faith, to be elected.
Right.
Yeah, and for me, I'm a daughter of immigrants. My parents came here from South Korea with next to nothing to achieve the American dream. And because they've been able to do so, I've had this amazing opportunity to pursue mine, which is public service. And I was so nervous, though, when I went to approach my parents about this, because I just feel like them being immigrants, they're so risk averse. And so, when I said, hey, Dad, I think I want to run for U.S. Congress, my dad, I was pleasantly surprised. He looked at me and he said, go fight. And he goes, I want to see my daughter in U.S. Congress. And so, I've had tremendous support, which I wasn't necessarily expecting. So that's been really helpful on the campaign
What's interesting
trail.
too, and I don't know, Pearl, but like my mom's finding things out about me through the media. And she's like,
hopefully nothing too bad.
Well, no, I remember, I don't know if maybe it was New York Times. I said, I think Allah is a she. And she's like, what? You think? And then I said, and I was like, Mom, yeah, I think it's a she. And then she kind of paused and she goes, well, half of the names for Allah, for God, is feminine. And I was like, yeah. And so in those little things, we're starting to have these conversations I've never had with my mother before.
And I've seen that as well. I mean, I think in Asian American culture, Korean American culture, it's really, really hard to talk about sexual violence. And, and it's unfortunately a part of my story and a part of my journey. So it's been difficult for me not to discuss it. And so, I could only imagine, the difficulty that my parents were going to have as I was discussing this on the campaign trail. And so I was like, Mom, you better tell Dad I just told Washington Post. And so it's been a process for the whole family.
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah, right here.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sharon Fairley. This past primary season, I ran for the office of Illinois Attorney General in the primary.
Congratulations.
And it was a great experience. But it seems to me that today, when we talk about this wave of women who are running for office, and particularly in reaction to Trump, it's always focused on women running for Congress.
Right.
Yet the attorney generals are really right now the first line of defense against the Trump administration, and really being very successful. And you guys are both lawyers. Did you ever consider that as a possibility? Because the attorney generals really play an important role in really our lives, right? And protecting, consumer protection, all of that. So did you ever think about it?
Is Pennsylvania elected or appointed Attorney General? Elected?
Elected, yes. And I worked for the current Attorney General. But like I said, I was never expecting to run for Congress. And it was just the fact that the seat had opened up. And, I was frustrated with the current climate of Washington and the rhetoric and some of the inaction. And then with this whole Me Too movement, for me, it was just this like a storm of inspiration, and I literally just dove in, tried to get the endorsement. I retired from my job so that everyone knew how serious I was when I was gunning for the endorsement.
Did you ever think of running for Attorney General?
No.
Well, but this raises a good point, because
I'm pretty rooted in community, and it's all in one county, Wayne County, which includes a large portion of Detroit, where I was born and raised. I think for me, it was this opportunity where the seat opened up, and for me to jump in. I have never thought about running for Attorney General, but I appreciate you putting the seed, I think.
I think it's a really good question, because it has been traditionally harder for women to run for executive office, right? Like, everyone thinks, oh, women, they're so collaborative, they'll be perfect in a legislative body, but the top job, like women as CEOs, we're not so sure. So I think it's a really good point that there's been a lot of focus on the legislative races, particularly federal. Anybody else?
Hello, I'm Karen Alinsky. I'm the president of the Financial Women's Association of New York, and I'm with Wells Fargo. First of all, thank you for running. I think we had a discussion today on political and public policy around unconscious bias, what public policies we could incent. Right. One thing that came up in it, and has been something I think about a lot, is how can we get the big donors to buy into women running for office? I wonder if you have any thoughts on that to share.
Well, no, I think that's actually one of the challenges. I think running as a woman of color, it's fundraising, right? It presents a lot of challenges, and then from my specific background as a government attorney, my contacts were victims or individuals in the refugee community. I'm not asking them for money, right? And so I think, that does pose a problem.
So it's hard for women. Is it harder for women of color, you think? Even harder? Rashida, what do you think?
I probably did something I shouldn't have done, which I compared of how much money, so I knew somebody donated to me, and I was like, wow, I know they donated more to Congressman Keith Ellison. So I'd look it up, and it would be triple the amount they were giving me. So, which really upset me. But
Same
even
donor.
when they do give, they don't give as much as they do to men. Yeah.
Any thoughts on how we can change it? I mean, how can we get them to think about gender when they're just thinking about contributing?
I started asking. I started doing something a little bit more, we're always so afraid, because they're like, Rashida, you're being aggressive. I'm like, they don't say that to the, But now I'm like, can you max me out? It comes right out of my mouth now. But it really helped. Another woman told me, Rashida, you're not asking for yourself. You're asking for your community that you're going to represent. I have the third poorest congressional district in the country. I can't ask my residents to give that amount of money and to be able to raise. And I wanted to stay grassroots, so I only, took money like from individuals, and it was very, very much inspiring to finally start asking, and people actually said yes.
Yeah, and I think another, another issue that I've seen presented with is I don't see as many women donating to political campaigns, right? And so, I'll take a look at my hosts, and I'm like, why are they all men? Where are the women? And so, I think that's another issue. And so, I just appreciate the summit, and for all the women that are here, and just we're all trying to empower one another.
Right, and that donation ties back to the pay gap as well. So these issues are all very much intertwined. We're unfortunately out of time. Thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
Good luck to you both.